Thank you very much, Benjamin, and I appreciate you guys including us in this. We're speaking from Los Angeles today, right across the street from our headquarters in Los Angeles. I want to talk about wealth creation and what wealth creation really can achieve, and maybe take in a slightly different direction, because I believe the world, and particularly the Judeo-Christian West, is in a crisis. And it's really the organizing principle of how we built Breitbart News to really be a platform to bring news and information to people throughout the world, principally in the West, but we're expanding internationally, to let people understand the depths of this crisis. And it is a crisis both of capitalism, but really of the underpinnings of the Judeo-Christian West in our beliefs. It's ironic, I think, that we're talking today at exactly tomorrow, 100 years ago, at the exact moment we're talking, the assassination took place in Sarajevo of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, that led to the really the end of the Victorian era and the beginning of the bloodiest century in mankind's history. Just to put it in perspective, with the assassination that took place 100 years ago tomorrow in Sarajevo, the world was at total peace. There was trade, there was globalization, there was technological transfer. The High Church of England and the Catholic Church and the Christian faith was predominant throughout Europe of practicing Christians. 7 weeks later, I think there were 5 million men in uniform, and within 30 days there were over 1 million casualties. That war triggered a century of barbarity, unparalleled in mankind's history. You know, virtually 180 to 200 million people were killed in the 20th century. And I believe that, you know, hundreds of years from now, when they look back, and we are children of that barbarity, that this will be looked at as almost a new dark age. But the thing that got us out of that, the organizing principle and the mechanism, was just not the heroism of our people, whether it was French resistance fighters, whether it was Polish resistance fighters, whether it's young men from Kansas City or the Midwest that stormed the beaches of Normandy, the men of England that fought in the Royal Air Force, all the people that fought in this great war of really the Judeo-Christian West versus atheism, right? The underlying principle was an enlightened form of capitalism. That capitalism really gave us the wherewithal to kind of organize, to build the materials that needed to support, whether it's the Soviet Union, England, the United States, and eventually to take back continental Europe and then to beat back a barbaric empire in the Far East. That capitalism really generated a tremendous wealth, and that wealth was really distributed among a middle class, a rising middle class. People would come from really working class environments, and created really what we call a Pax Americana, but it was a many years and decades of peace. And I believe that we've come horribly off track in the years since the fall of the Soviet Union, and we're starting now in the 21st century, which I believe strongly is a crisis both of our church, a crisis of our faith, a crisis of the West, and a crisis of capitalism. And we're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict, of which if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, to really be able to not just stand with our beliefs, but to fight for our beliefs against this new barbarity that's starting, that we will literally eradicate everything that we've been bequeathed over the last 2,000 to 2,500 years. Now, what I mean by that specifically, I think that you're seeing three kind of converging tendencies. One is a form of capitalism that is taken away from the underlying spiritual and moral foundations of Christianity and really Judeo-Christian belief. I can see that every day. You know, I'm a very practical, pragmatic capitalist. You know, I was trained at Goldman Sachs. I went to Harvard Business School. You know, I'm as hard-nosed a capitalist as you can get. I specialize in media and investing in media companies, and it's a very, very tough environment. And we've had a fairly good track record. So I don't come at this as kind of some namby-pamby, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya around capitalism. But there's a strand of capitalism today, two strands of it that are very disturbing. One is state-sponsored capitalism, and that's the capitalism you see in China and Russia. I believe it's what the Holy Father has seen most of his life in places like Argentina, where you have this kind of crony capitalism of people that are dialed in either to the military or to the powers to be in the government. And it forms a very brutal form of capitalism that is really about accreting wealth and accreting value to a very small subset of people. And it doesn't spread the tremendous value creation throughout a broader distribution patterns that we've seen really in the 20th century. The second form of capitalism, I feel, it's almost as disturbing, is what I call the Ayn Rand or the objectivist school of libertarian capitalism. And look, I'm a big believer in a lot of libertarianism. I have many, many friends, and it's a very big part of the conservative movement, whether it's the UKIP movement in England, it's many of the underpinnings of the populist movement throughout Europe, and particularly in the United States. However, that form of capitalism is quite different when you really look at it to what I call the enlightened capitalism of the Judeo-Christian West. It is a capitalism that really looks to make people commodities and to objectify people and to use them as really almost as many of the precepts of Marx. And that is a form of capitalism, particularly to a younger generation, that they're really finding quite attractive. And if they don't see another alternative, it is going to be an alternative that they gravitate to under this kind of rubric of personal freedom. The other tendency is an immense secularization of the West. And I know we've talked about secularization for a long time, but if you look at younger people, particularly millennials under 30, the overwhelming drive of popular culture is to absolutely secularize this rising generation. Now, that all converges with something that we have to face, and it's a very unpleasant topic, but we are in an outright war against jihadist Islamic fascism. And this war is I think, metastasizing almost far quicker than governments can handle it. If you look at what is happening in ISIS, which is the Islamic State of Syria and the Levant, that is now currently forming a caliphate that is having a military drive on Baghdad. If you look at the sophistication of which they've taken the tools of capitalism, if you look at what they're doing with Twitter and Facebook and modern ways to fundraise and to use crowdsourcing to fund, it is, besides all the access to weapons, etc., over the last couple of days, they have had a radical program of taking kids and trying to turn them into bombers. They have driven 50,000 Christians out of a town near the Kurdish border. We have video we're going to be putting up later today on Breitbart where they took 50 hostages and threw them off a cliff in Iraq. And that war is expanding, and it's metastasizing to sub-Saharan Africa. We have Boko Haram and other groups that will eventually partner with ISIS in this global war. And it is unfortunately something we're going to have to face, and we're going to have to face very quickly. And so I think the discussion of, can we put a cap on wealth creation and distribution, it's something that should be at the heart of every Christian that is a capitalist. Is what is the purpose I'm doing with this wealth? What is the purpose of what we're doing with this, with the ability that God has given us and divine providence has given us to actually be a creator of jobs and creator of wealth? I think it behooves all of us to really take a hard look and to make sure that we are reinvesting that back into positive things, but also to make sure that we understand that we're at the very beginning stages of a global conflict, and that if we do not bind together as partners with others in other countries, that this conflict is only going to metastasize. They have a Twitter account up today, ISIS does, about turning the United States into a river of blood if it comes in and tries to defend the city of Baghdad. And trust me, that is going to come to Europe. That is going to come to Central Europe. It's going to come to Western Europe, and it's going to come to the United Kingdom. And so I think that we are in a crisis, like I said, a crisis of capitalism and really the underpinnings of capitalism. And on top of that, we're now, I believe, at the beginning stages of a global war against Islamic fascism. Ben, if you guys have any questions, I'm glad to take any questions.